Well, hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. And here's the headline we're going to be diving into. The headline says, Gen Z fails basic civics quiz. Now, if you get a little confused about Gen this, Gen that, Generation Z is basically people under 30. So what you might call the younger people. But what's going to happen to our country if the younger people don't know the principles that our country was founded on? Well, we're going to dive into this new poll and what it means with Mike Sharman. He's a lot closer to Washington, D.C. than we are, the seat of power, Mike. And he's an attorney and the general counsel for Share Healthcare, and he loves the United States, and like most of us, wants to see us continue strong for many generations to come. But we're going to have to ramp up our education of the young if we're going to last for many more generations. So, Mike Sharman, let's dive into this headline, Gen Z fails basic civics quiz.
Well, you know, I think one of your lead-in things, Doug, helps us reorient our own minds. You're right that Washington, D.C. is the seat of power, not just for the United States, but for the world. But wouldn't it be great if we could reorient our minds to what our founders had said in the Declaration of Independence, we the people. Mm-hmm. And so where should the seat of power be? It should be in the chairs around the kitchen table.
Right.
And that's, you know, if we realize that, if we think about that, we're going to be more attuned to all these other things. So here we had that headline from the survey that was done just the week before the 4th of July this year. Okay, so half a year of our 2026 had passed by when this survey was done, and it found that 61% of this large sampling, national sampling of people under 30 did not know what we were celebrating, did not know what the 250th was an anniversary of. Only 39% of them knew that we were celebrating the birth of our nation, the creation of our birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence, 4th of July, 1776 is 250 years ago. They didn't know it. Well, what are they being taught? What's being talked about? What's the narrative of the nation? And remember, that survey was done a half year into 2026 with all the publicity and everything surrounding our 250th, and they still didn't know. So here's kind of the wake up and shake up part of this beyond that stunning idea. Okay, so Pew Research says that there's 3.3 to 3.5 Muslims in the United States, just 1 to 1.1% of the population. 9% of the U.S. adults identify as LGBT, which is 9% is a lot. That is twice as much as in 2020, but it's still just 9%. But 62 to 65% of Americans identify as Christians. So what's wrong with this picture? I mean, how come you have the 1% Muslim, 9% LGBT, and that's what's driving the narrative, not the 62% to 65% of Americans who are Christians who should be teaching those under 30 that the founding of our nation was inherently biblical. It was the culmination of at least the 40 years of the Great Awakening that had been going on in the U.S. prior to 1776 when the revolution took place. And that almost every bit of the writings, the ideas, the theory of the revolution that had been talking about for 40 years before and leading up to and culminating in 1776 were on our God-given rights and the fact that the royalty was trampling on it. If the royalty won't listen, what can we do? What biblical right do we have to do it, etc.? We haven't been teaching our young, and the Christians have the duty to do this, and the Christian culture does, the Christian nation does. If we haven't been teaching those basic emblems of our national existence, our great seal, our national anthem, our Pledge of Allegiance, and our national motto, all of which are inherently biblical and Christian. If we haven't been teaching them, it's our fault, not their fault for not learning. So that's where we are today. The 4th of July is come and gone. but we're still in the 250th year of the celebration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is our birth certificate as a nation. And it's just extraordinary that that many, 61%, didn't know that. But okay, that was yesterday. That's the past. That's history. So now let's move forward into the future and look at what we can do to change it. And the best way of changing it is to let them know what current things there are that can alert them to those issues. And those are our Great Seal, which is a current issue. That's currently our Great Seal of our nation. Our national anthem, that's currently our national anthem. Our Pledge of Allegiance, it's currently, and our national motto is. Now, each one of those things came into existence in times of crisis or were made official in times of crisis. And so that's important to look at that history and realize, okay, we've had crisis times before, but we've gotten past it. So when was the first time you think you learned about the Pledge of Allegiance, let's say, Doug?
Well, I'm not certain, but I'm thinking probably kindergarten.
Right. And it would have said under God at that time, right?
Well, because when did they put that in the 50s?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's older than me.
Right. And pretty much anybody around, most of the people around, that it would have been in place then. And when do you think the first time that you realized our national motto is, "In God We Trust"?
Well, I guess the first time I read it on some money.
Right. I mean, these are just silly things. Now, a lot of people don't realize that our national anthem is a hymn and has that idea in it, "In God We Trust," is in the last stanza of that. Mm-hmm. And they don't know about the Great Seal. So let's kind of hit on some of those things. So first, let's look at what was the conclusion of the Declaration of Independence. All right, it was talked about and passed, and it was voted on July 2nd, 1776, and they saw the text of it July 4th, 1776. And the very conclusion of it, toward right at the very end, it says, "And for support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we," and that's the delegates to the convention that were signing it, "we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Now, for the purpose of our discussion today, the part we want to focus on in that sentence is, "with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence." So when you look up the word trust in the dictionary, interestingly, the definition is a firm reliance on the integrity, ability, or character of a person or thing. So those signers to the Declaration were saying they had a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. And boy, would they have had to have a whole lot of trust at that time, because here they are voting for and agreeing with high treason. They were going to be taking from the king a very large asset of the king's, which was all 13 colonies and everything in it, because the king owned everything. Mm-hmm. And they were going to take away his power. And so anyway, by signing that declaration, it was high treason. And then that's not theory. The king responded that way and put out execution notices specifically for a number of them, and then generically for them all. A firm reliance on the integrity, ability, or character of a person or thing. But they knew what they were doing was right. They knew that they did need to speak up for the rights of their own people. And they also knew that they were speaking for people in other countries and in future generations. And what specifically really were they talking about? That each person individually, just by virtue of being a human, had certain inalienable rights. Well, where'd they get those rights? They said, we are all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these, our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then they had gone on and said, well, to secure those rights is the reason why government's formed. and is formed by the consent of the governed. That's what they had said. All right, so that's what they did on July 4th. They decided they were going to put their firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence because nothing else was going to get them through this. It had to be God, because there's no way this previously unformed nation was going to be able to defeat the greatest empire, literally the greatest empire in the world at that time, the biggest army, biggest navy. And by the way, the colonials, now the members of the continental nation, the United States, that now they didn't have an army really. They had a grouping of militias from different counties, cities, states, but they had no real army. They definitely had no navy. What did they have? They had a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, and it paid off. You know, we want to be thinking about when we're having to make a real tough decision about whether to go along with the power or to do what is right. If we have a firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, it'll go okay. It might not have the exact result we want, but God will be pleased, and whenever you obey God, it will, in the long term, wind up doing well for you. What would have happened if during a time that Dr. Fauci was learning about all these possibilities of danger for people with the COVID vaccine, instead of keeping it to himself and telling lies to the public, what would have happened if either he or those that he was discussing this with had actually come out and talked about it to the public, because they had the courage based upon the firm reliance on the protection of providence? How many people would have been able to have the babies that were lost as a result of those vaccines? How many people would have been able to share the last hours with their loved ones that they were kept out of? You know, we have a number of friends in different situations where their parent was dying and they could not see them, or their parent was locked up, literally locked up and held in a assisted living home, and all the best they could do is wave to them through a window from a distance. I mean, there's just all sorts of horrific things that happened during COVID. But if we had somebody who had the courage to say, the powers that be are wrong, and even though I might be in the elite circle, which is what these signers of the Declaration were, these were the power brokers, the influencers, the rich and the powerful of their day. But they were extraordinarily weak in comparison to the British Empire. But because of the moral force that they knew they had behind them, and because of their firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, they were willing to speak up, they were willing to act, and they were willing to lay down their lives, their fortunes, and on pledge of their sacred honor. Not one of them, by the way, lost their sacred honor. Not one of them turned and said, oh, whoops, we did wrong. Many of them lost their lives, and many of them lost their fortunes. Do you know, interestingly, that same afternoon of July 4th, 1776, is when the committee was formed to create the Great Seal. And the committee, had a number of folks on it, among them Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, his wife was very ill at that time. She had one of her miscarriages, and so he had to leave shortly after they had passed the Declaration. And so he really didn't have a lot to do with the actual creation of the Great Seal. He did have an idea of what he wanted for a theme for it, and so did Benjamin Franklin. And they both wrote down what their ideas were. Franklin's was Moses standing on the shore, extending his hand over the sea, thereby causing the same to overwhelm Pharaoh, who is sitting in an open chariot. And by the way, this description that I'm telling you is what Franklin wrote down in his own handwriting. A crown on his head, a sword in his hand, raised from a pillar of fire in the clouds, reaching to Moses to express that he acts by command of the deity. And Franklin suggested the motto, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. And by the way, he got that motto from Pastor John Mayhew, who had written it sometime before in some of the writings that led up to the Revolution. But so that's what Benjamin Franklin wrote that he wanted to have for the Great Seal. Now, does that fit anything that you would have heard about what Franklin's ideas were about theology and God's hand on all of this?
Well, of course, some of the narrative is that Franklin was a deist at best.
When he was a young man, he was an atheist, and very outspoken atheist. He became an agnostic, then became a deist, and at this time, as he's an elder statesman now and then moving on toward the Constitution period, I'd say he was a conservative Christian of what we would say, of a classic Christianity, absolute believe in it. But when you see, there isn't a deist that's saying the Great Seal should be all of these biblical metaphors, biblical symbols of an active, present God. Mm-hmm. Moses standing on the shore, the act of God was going to be there. A pillar of fire, act of God, etc. So that was Franklin's idea. Jefferson also suggested biblical scenes. His idea was the children of Israel in the wilderness, led by God's Shekinah glory, cloud by day and his pillar of fire by night. Again, that doesn't fit anything that we've been taught about how Jefferson was, but that's what Jefferson wrote that he wanted to have. Now, maybe because of his rush to leave and his concern about his wife, he just conceded, and Franklin's idea is what that first committee sent in as what they wanted to have for the seal. Well, obviously, we can look at the back of our dollar bill and we can see that's not what happened. There were more committees and more committees, and so by the end of the Revolutionary War, on June 20th, 1782 is when the third committee came in with their suggestions, and that still isn't what we wound up getting. There was a Secretary of the Continental Congress, Charles Thompson, who finished up the seals. He kind of brought them together, cleaned it up, changed the mottos on it. He was an orphaned 10-year-old Irish boy whose dad had sailed from Ireland with he and his six brothers, Charles Thompson's six brothers. And the dad died within sight of the shore. The captain of that ship took all the dad's possessions, took his money, and put the boys out there on the street of Newcastle, Delaware, with nothing. And the boy was taken in and educated by just a kind lady in that area. He became a Greek and Latin tutor, and then a scholar, and then a professor, and then he became the only secretary in the 15 years of the Continental Congress. Well, it was him who came up with those phrases that we see on the back of our dollar bill. When you look and you see that pyramid-looking thing with the eye at the top, that's the all-seeing eye of God over the government of the land and over all of our land. If you saw that Great Seal in larger proportion, you'd see people and plants and animals around there. And over the top, because remember, Charles Thompson was a Latin and Greek scholar. Over the top in Greek is Anno Acceptus, which means God approves of our undertaking. Then you have that all-seeing eye of God over everything. And then underneath it is Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means a new order of the ages. So what's the new order? Well, we're a nation created under God, placing our firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence for it. And he did protect us. And it has, we're the first nation and really the only nation that has ever been created in all of history that was based on that biblical premise, but also declared that biblical premise of we're all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Each individual is the power, not a king. Where do the rights come from? By our Creator. What are those rights? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not a guarantee of happiness. Not a we're going to pay you until you get happy. But you have the right to pursue happiness. And then in that, on that dollar bill that you're looking at, where you see that God approves of our undertaking, we're in a new order of the ages. Right in the center of it is in God we trust. That's our national motto. So we had seen that in a number of ways. One, that idea, that concept, and the firm reliance on the protection. But then September 13, 1814, the Star-Spangled Banner came into existence. But it didn't come into existence as the Star-Spangled Banner because that's not what Francis Scott Key had called it. He had called it the hymn for the Battle of the Fort McHenry. And Francis Scott Key was an attorney. And this is during the War of 1812. It's interesting, it's called the War of 1812, but here we are in 1814, it's still going on. And so he's on board a British ship as an attorney to try to negotiate the release of an American doctor who had been captured. While he's on board, the battle for Fort McHenry starts occurring, and the night goes on. And all through the night, he and the doctor and the captain just stood at the rail of that ship and looked out at what was going on in that battle, but they couldn't really see. All they could see is the bombs going off and projectiles going back and forth, and he didn't know what was going to occur. Was he going to wake up? Was dawn have broken with him being now a prisoner of a vanquished nation, a rebellious nation? Or would he now be able to be a citizen of a free country that had just won a very, very critical battle? Because everybody knew that battle for Fort McHenry was part of the battle for Baltimore, which was a very strategic, important issue. And so when dawn occurred, he was able to see the American flag still flying. And that just brought a poem into his mind just immediately. And he pulled out a letter from his pocket and just started writing on the back of that letter his poem, which he called a hymn. And the last verse of it, which they don't sing at baseball games because they only sing one, but the last verse of it is, "Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave." So we didn't have that as a national motto for a while. We didn't have it until June 30th, 1956, and it was adopted as our national motto then. So what was occurring then? We were in the heat of the Cold War then, is what was going on. And Eisenhower saw that was a real issue. And he wanted to make a clear distinction between us and the godless communists. And so he had proposed in 1954 that we add "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance. And then in 1956, Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, had told Western ambassadors, and this is the quote, "Whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you." So what happened? We proclaimed that our national motto was going to be "In God we trust." Not in our chariots, not in our airplanes, not in our military might, not in our economic powers, but in God. And guess what? The Soviet Union no longer exists. But we do, and we're stronger than ever. I know we might moan and bemoan where we're at right now, but don't you think they had some real concerns in 1776 or 1814 or in 1861 when Treasury Secretary Salmon Chase asked the "In God We Trust" to be put on our coins for the first time ever? In 1961, President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, was being inaugurated. And in his inaugural, he said, "The world is very different now. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs to which our forefathers fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God." And then a month later, he said this was in a speech, obviously not his inaugural anymore. In his speech, he said, "It's an ironic fact that in this nuclear age, when the horizon of human knowledge and human experience has passed far beyond any that any age has ever known, that we turn back at this time to the oldest source of wisdom and strength, to the words of the prophets and the saints, who tell us that faith is more powerful than doubt, that hope is more potent than despair, and that only through the love that is sometimes called charity can we conquer those forces within ourselves and throughout all the world that threaten the very existence of mankind. The guiding principle in prayer of this nation has been, is now, and ever shall be, in God we trust. So November 2nd, 2011, Barack Hussein Obama was president. Nancy Pelosi had lost her position as Speaker of the House when the Republicans won control. And a Virginia congressman, Randy Forbes, proposed a House concurrent resolution to reaffirm "In God We Trust" as the official motto, and to have it be publicly displayed in all public buildings, public schools, and other government institutions. And it passed. In 2011, it passed 396 to 9. So if we're teaching the young just these basic emblems, our Great Seal, our Pledge of Allegiance, our national motto, our national anthem, they'll know what has protected us as a nation. They'll know the things that we need to have first and foremost whenever we're having a crisis. And that's our firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. So what say you, Doug?
Well, I think you gave us quite an excellent way to easily teach the young with some of these very basics, as you said, our national emblems. And people can do that today. And then that triggers a deeper conversation into the founding of the country, the founding principles, the Declaration, the Constitution. And then for older students, it's easy to tie into today's headlines, such as, we're electing socialists these days. And, well, what does that mean? And why is that a problem? And, you start getting your kids become teenagers. These things need to be discussed in order to prevent the nation from just spiraling off in some bad direction. Absolutely. And you can give a communist or a socialist a religious tract that I guarantee they'll accept. And that religious tract is that dollar bill. Oh.
You can hand it to them and say, hey, do you know what this says? God approves of our undertaking. That's the all-seeing eye of God that looks out over all our land, all our government, everything we have. And underneath there's a new world order of the ages. Can you say that there's ever been a time in your life when God can look out over all of your life and say he approves of it? Has there been a time that you've had a new order in your life? Has there been a time that you can say, in God we trust? It's protected our nation, and by the way, it's protected me. How about you?
Yeah.
So we're all carrying that religious tract that anybody will accept anywhere in the world.
Well, we did mention that you're the general counsel for Share Healthcare, and we might want to mention something about that. Well, if we don't keep our freedoms, if we do have socialism take over, the more advanced we have of government, the more we march towards the inevitable result of socialism, which is communism, then we won't have the freedom to do much of anything. And so Share Healthcare is a tool for us to exercise our freedom muscles, to exercise the freedom we have right now, but also to strengthen it. It's a 501c3 nonprofit medical, it's a mission, and the mission is helping Christians share one another's medically necessary medical expenses. So, we have folks that go around to different events and put up our, put a table up, and we have a sign in the back with what we are and pretty pictures and things like that. But the thing that's drawn people to the table most is when we just had handwritten a sign that said, no government involved. People want freedom. And so Share Healthcare is financial freedom. It's only $149 for a single per month, $249 for a couple, $349 for a family of four. And this is the way for you all to be sharing your medical expenses with other Christians, and Christians be sharing with you. And so you have that financial freedom. We have the medical freedom. So instead of having to follow Dr. Fauci's dictates or who his successor is
We're having, good people in those medical governmental positions right now, but there's no guarantee we will in the future. So you have the medical freedom for you to go to any licensed medical professional in the world. That you don't have a network you're stuck with, and your doctor isn't stuck with having to do what the insurance company says they must do, because we're not an insurance company. This is the church's response on how the church, with capital C, church's response on how to deal with our medical expenses and our medical care. And then spiritual freedom. Of course, we're trying to be doing this in a way and in processes that honor God and that God will honor. So that's Share Healthcare in a nutshell.
All right. Well, very good. If someone wants more information, what should they do next?
Well, remember our name, Share Healthcare, and look up our website, sharehealthcare.com, and then they can call they can call 844-SHARE-HC, 1-844-SHARE-HC.
All right. So 1-844-SHARE-HC or sharehealthcare.com. And we talked about a lot of things today. And if you'd like to hear it again, you can just look up the Share Healthcare podcast, and all of our discussions are on there, including this one about Gen Z failing the basic civics quiz. And just look it up on the podcast and you can hear it again and get those details that Mike shared. And for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.